Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to both of the witnesses in this panel. Most instructive. We have seen the retreat of freedom in numerous countries around the world, and you have both described the malevolent effort on the part of Russia and China in pushing their agenda. Why are we failing? Why are we less successful? We're the largest economy in the world. We spend massive amounts on our military, on our soft power, and yet we are seeing the retreat of that which is essential to our freedom and to our prosperity and to the well-being of people throughout the world. If you had to help us understand what we're not doing right and what we need to do differently, what might that be? And let me start with Secretary Albright and then Ambassador Dobriansky.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Senator Romney. I think that it is a basic question as to why we are failing. I do think that in some ways we were taking too much for granted at the end of the Cold War, when all of a sudden there was this great spurt of democracy and countries wanted to figure out how to have democratic governments. They didn't have the infrastructure for it. And it's interesting because President Reagan, when he spoke in Parliament, he said that the problem was that we were not very good at defining democracy versus communism. And I think that's true. That's why he established the National Endowment and the various institutes under it. And we were doing very well, frankly, immediately after the Cold War. And I think, and I keep asking myself the question of then what happened? And I think that we took for granted in many ways that countries would automatically understand the benefits of democracy and didn't fully understand that there were still malevolent forces within the countries that were going to undermine it, and that the various economic divisions were then there set out for demagogic leaders to exacerbate. I also think that we have been somewhat naive about the methods that the Russians specifically, we're dealing with a former KGB officer. Putin knows how to use a variety of tactics to undermine other countries and is using the new technology in ways that we have not developed a good enough defense system. And so I do think that one of the things that's going to have to happen, and from my sense is that as I read some of the Biden material, they are aware of the kind of undermining that is being done through cyber and misinformation in a way that technology is being used, and the Chinese and the others are doing it. And so I think that having this kind of a hearing and having really the sense that we have, one, not paid enough attention, we have been AWOL, two, that in fact, we have not used our, quote, public diplomacy tools well enough in order to counter a lot of what is going on, and then really have more defensive ways of dealing with the cyber attacks and things that have been going on, and understanding that there are an awful lot of holes in the way that we are responding to this new threat.
Thank you, Madam Secretary.
Senator, thank you for the question. I would use the term which I used before in response to the chairman's first question, which is complacency. I believe that we have been very complacent about what we are about. And when I look past, and certainly post-Cold War to the present time, we have not been engaged in advocating, strongly advocating for our values and what we are about. So complacency, I think, has been problematic. But combined with the fact that we have not adjusted to the new kind of ideological warfare. I remember that you, years back, had identified Russia as our geopolitical foe. And absolutely, we have to adapt to the kinds of instruments that are being used to undermine not just our values, values and human freedoms at large. There is this kind of effort that's taking place, as my statement just started off with, the great power competition, which is geared specifically to undermining not just U.S. power, fragment our alliances, but in fact to stem the tide of democracy development. So complacency has to be addressed. an awareness of the kinds of new instruments that we should be using to advance democracy. And I would also add in this a moral narrative. And the moral narrative is truly important, and not just us. It has to be with our allies, our partners, those who subscribe to democratic values, to understand that there is this kind of ideological challenge and battle of ideas. And finally, I would just say, which I think is the essence of this hearing, which I welcome very much today, and that is that democracy needs to be a core element of U.S. foreign policy and integrated at the front end, as has been said many times here this morning, not at the back end.
Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Coons.